Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 114, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Ravi Abbott.
Now, welcome to this week's show, where we are going to talk a little bit about a subject that I think is kind of neglected in the grand scheme of retro gaming quite a bit. So everyone kind of goes crazy about graphics. And they're always talking about, like, you know, if you want to make a modern remake of a retro game or you want to set an emulator up, the graphics have got to be perfect. It's that pixel-perfect precision. But people often forget how important audio is.
Yeah, and you're right. I've kind of noticed with some emulators, like especially that AtGames thing last year, you know, people will be like, this is a great emulator, but they haven't actually plugged it in and test the sound. And as soon as they hear the sound, it's like, or skipping or not playing at the right speed. You know, it's amazing how different people have heard different sounds because of, even with Sonic's soundtrack, you know, that was at a different rate, so it sounded fantastically fast in the Americas.
Oh, an NTSC.
Yeah. And in the UK, we had a little slow Sonic that we're kind of used to.
That's weird you mentioned that, because I was watching that on YouTube the other day, and like this guy, he'd done like a PAL version of Sonic the Hedgehog. He'd done a little playthrough of, and all the comments are like, why is the sound slow? Because it's people that had played it on NTSC systems and never heard that. And I mean, that was kind of pre-internet, obviously. We didn't really know what was right. But I think you often get that if you sit someone down in front of a game and the soundtrack is a bit off on the emulator, or like you said, that Sega AtGames thing, it sounds a bit weird. A lot of people who are not audio people through and through, they may notice something's wrong with the game, but not quite be able to put their finger on exactly what it is.
Not realise that, it's just that this is an octave lower or something like this. And the kind of guy we've got on today, Jeroen Tel, is just one of the most fantastic sound guys. And this was for the C64, which had the SID chip, which was...
we are not worthy.
We are not worthy of you, SID chip. And, you know, Jeroen, he was a 12-year-old kid and he was bashing the metal. This was before any programs were kind of made to create sound on the computer. So Jeroen was there, you know, hacking away, and he was getting offered jobs by, EA and stuff, you know, age 13 and 14.
Illegal in today's day and age, but
probably.
You know, that was back in the 80s. Everything was all right then. But you're right. I mean, we're talking about, you know, guess what we've had in the show before, for example, before we came on. It was like Chris Hulsbeck's been on. We've had Rob Hubbard, legendary Commodore 64 musicians. But Jeroen is up there with them in terms of stature, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, there's great other ones like Martin Galway as well, and, you know, Chris Abbott. And
you will get on one day,
yeah, we will.
I'm confident in you. But, you know, you're talking about the Commodore 64. We did have a C64. I mean, probably a bit later than most people. My brother got one in about 1991, 92. Quite late on. But I remember going into his room, like loading up games and leaving the soundtrack playing while we did other stuff, like, you know, tidying up or reading magazines or whatever.
Well, the soundtrack kind of helped set the pace, didn't it, of the game? And, you know, a lot of them would be platformers, and they'd have that kind of bump in, boom, 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 or space shooters or something like that. And it very fitting with the rave stuff at the time.
And
Well,
I think you look back then as well. I mean, the amount of creativity the producers had, because a lot of the times, as we've heard in previous interviews, they didn't get much of a brief apart from, it's a space game.
Yeah, totally.
They have that to work with. So, looking at the credits that Jeroen's worked on, I mean, I remember playing Golden Axe on the Commodore 64. That was a great port. And the music was better than the arcade, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. And Cybernoid, you know, as well, Smash TV. He worked for a lot of the companies as well, like Probe. And he also worked for Hewson Consultants. He did a lot of different projects, and also disc mags and cracktros. So he wasn't just limited to this. And he had a noise group called the Maniacs of Noise.
And they were kind of very early on, weren't they?
Yeah, very early on. You know, I think Rob Hubbard used a lot of their stuff as well back. Wow. So they all helped each other back then.
Well, it is just true. And I remember reading, actually, that the last ever game that came out on the Commodore 64 was one that he worked on.
And the Lemmings.
Lemmings, C64. But a lot of people are like, what, Lemmings came out on the 64? 1993 that came out. And if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link in our show notes. Check out the music on YouTube. It is banging compared to other platforms. Yeah. So I've got to ask him about that. Really excited about this one. Jeroen Tel, the legendary chip music producer, is coming up on this week's podcast. The interview will be on in around 15 minutes from now. And let's just take a moment to thank some more fantastic people. They are the people who allow us to keep doing the Retro Hour podcast and bring you fantastic guests like this week in, week out. And they're people who make donations into the running of the show. We do have a little PayPal link on the front page of our website, or if you're into cryptocurrency, think of it as a tip jar, a couple of quid in the hat that will allow us to keep producing this show, you know, pay for the costs and that kind of thing. It all really helps, guys. So if you can, amazing. If you can't, completely fine with that too. But you'll find your place in the Hall of Fame if you make a donation. There is no bigger accolade than that in the world of retro. And this week, it's better than a golden joystick. Come on.
Oh, definitely. That was cheap, wasn't it?
Spray-painted cheetah joystick. Come on. But this week, thank you for your donations and making your place in the Hall of Fame. Aidan O'Lone.
Bart Pellens.
Matthew Willets.
And Andrew Holland.
Who all made donations into the running of the Retro Hour podcast. You can do the same via PayPal or crypto on our website at theretrohour.com. Now, before we get into this week's interview, we've got some massive news that we've been so excited to talk about this.
You've been chomping at the bit, haven't you, Dan?
How long have we known about this?
Oh, it must be about,
6 months?
6 months, yeah. And this is Play London. This is a huge event in the capital, Londinium, the great city. And there's not been a retro show there for years, has there?
Well, this is Play Expo, obviously the big event that we've done all around the country. And this will be like, we're into our third year now of doing Play Expo. We've done events all over the nation, and then people are all saying to us, though, aren't they? Oh, I've just travelled up from London or Essex or Brighton. And even people that come from abroad, a lot of people land at Heathrow or Gatwick and then get the train up to Blackpool to come and play up there because it's such a good event, people want to come to it.
Totally.
But like you said, there hasn't been a high-profile retro gaming event in the capital.
There's been a retro store in the capital. There's been stores on the edge of the capital because it's expensive, but there's not been any kind of huge retro event, so we're hoping this is going to be the one. And, we're going to pull out all stops for this. This is going to be the Retro Hour stage with some amazing panels. All these people have met up in these different events and in Blackpool, and, they've got a little community because that's been going on for years. There's nothing like that in London, so hopefully you can meet a load of new friends, just go around and play consoles all day, see some great talks.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Play. I mean, it's not just, like a show. Because I know there is stuff like, there's something happening right now at the Science Museum, like a console exhibition, which is very cool, but it's more like a museum. Play's very hands-on. I mean, not only have you got a massive trading area where you can get, bargains that are a lot cheaper than eBay, you've got Sega Game Gear games for like a tenner each.
But it's not just that kind of gaming as well. There's a whole VR zone.
Yeah.
There's like board gaming there. There's pinball. If you're a pinball freak, you can just go and meet all the other pinball guys and talk pinball all weekend.
Yeah, pinball nerds.
You can have your own event. It's great.
Well, my mate David, who I work with, David Dunn, he's like a massive pinball fan. And he came to one of our events last year, brought his little lad with him, who was like 9 years old. He never played a pinball machine before, and he's like, wow, is that the lights and everything?
Yeah, 50 in a row, It's really good. So you can turn it into what you want. It's really amazing event. Recommend it to everybody.
And the arcades as well. I mean, it's kind of, that takes me back to like being 12 years old again, walking into a room with beeping arcades and that smell that you get in the air of all the cabinets plugged in. And obviously we're going to be doing the Retro Hour Talk stage, which we are planning to do our best one yet here at Play London. So if you want to get tickets for this, I mean, it's one not to miss. Right in the middle of summer as well. The kids will be off school. Make a family weekend. Do the rest of London while you're there as well. And it's going to be happening on the 11th and the 12th of August at the Printworks in London. Have you seen the venue?
Oh my God, it looks like a big fat rave palace. I didn't know there was venues kind of that big left in London. I thought they'd all been sold off to be expensive flats.
Well, they do nightclub events and all that in there, so maybe a Ravi's rave.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, if this one goes well, we'll see what happens.
Now, before we do that, of course, we are going to be at the other end of the UK.
Well, I'm going to be there. Dan won't be there, but I'll be there with a couple of YouTubers and crew.
Yeah, Kim Justice, Slopes Game Room, who had in Blackpool last year. They're going to be coming along for Play Expo in Glasgow. Now, this one's happening on the 9th and 10th of June. It's a little bit earlier, start of the summer, and I think, I'm really quite good at missing this one, actually, because I've heard there is a really good gaming scene up in Glasgow.
Yeah, the thing about Glasgow is Play Glasgow is a new festival, so it's only been going for a couple of years, and they've never had panels. So we're going to try out some panels here, see how the Scottish gamers react. And the really cool thing about it is when we're in Blackpool, we got a load of Scottish gamers coming down anyway to join us because Blackpool's quite close.
It'd be rude not to go and see them.
Yeah. So now we're going to their territory.
I think the real point here is wherever you are in the country, there's an event that we're going to be at that you can attend this year. That's not too far away from you, hopefully. And we've also got a second one in Blackpool that's going to be coming up at the end of the season as well, at the end of October. But you can get links to all these. Tickets are on sale for the events right now, and we'll be keeping you posted over the next few weeks on our website, theretrohour.com. The only reason I can't do Glasgow is because it's Samantha's 30th birthday.
Yeah. Well, who knows? It could be New York, Japan and Taiwan soon.
I think then I might have more chance of convincing it to come to a retro gaming event on the birthday, but we'll see. So if you want to get your tickets booked for any of those Play events that we will be at hosting the talks, head to our website, theretrohour.com. Now, speaking of things that are happening in London, have you heard about this? There's going to be a huge concert dedicated to PlayStation music.
Oh, no, that's quite cool, because I knew there was concerts dedicated to individual pieces, like, you know, there was the Tomb Raider concert recently, and there's been these video game music live ones, but what's this one about?
Well, this is a dedication to the PlayStation, so it's by the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Oh, wow, they're one of the best in the world, aren't they?
I don't think you could really get much more prestigious than that, really. And they're going to be doing, so I mean, you know, they're kind of exploring gaming culture. That's what this is about. And there's going to be, if you haven't seen the Philharmonic Orchestra before, it's 80 strong. So it's a massive orchestra. And they're going to be doing soundtracks from stuff like The Last of Us, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, Little Big Planet. And essentially it's going to be games that are from the PlayStation 1, 2, 3 and 4. So going back to the mid-90s.
Oh, cool. So they'll be starting from the beginning and then kind of going to the later stuff. Oh, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to go and see that, because I saw Dear Esther live.
Yeah, what was it? You loved that, didn't you?
Which was just absolutely fantastic. And seeing classical music in a big hall and stuff, especially when it's about video games, you're like, oh, they're important.
What's the thing when you've got, I mean, Classic FM are behind this.
Yeah.
They're organising it. And the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra obviously involved doing the performance. Sony are behind it too.
Well, the cool thing about Classic FM is I listen to Classic FM quite a bit.
While you're doing your gardening.
Yeah, and I've actually noticed that they start to cover a lot of cultural stuff now. So like this video game music, but they're also covering stuff like film soundtracks and Star Wars and all of this kind of stuff. So there's some great stuff to be heard on it.
Well, apparently there's going to be like a light show that's going to be involved in this as well. And also they're going to be doing some kind of clever stuff with people's smartphones in the audience and control things.
Oh, nice.
So, and tickets start at £20 as well. And it's coming up on May the 30th. So if you want to find out more about that, we'll put a link to get your tickets in this week's show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, when we're looking for retro video games, if we're not at these big, you know, retro trading shows, choices are a little bit limited on the high street today as to where you can get video games from.
Yeah, it's kind of degraded, hasn't it? It's like you used to have independent retro retailers everywhere, and now you've got a few, but then you've got pawn shops everywhere and exchange places. And it kind of reminds me of Judge Dredd when they go into the exchange places and buy one of those big robots. But this is a story that's been picked up by Top Hat Gaming, who's a great guy. We met him in Blackpool, and he's got a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Now
he's doing very well at the moment as well.
Yeah, because Top Hat Gaming is doing this kind of expose thing at the moment, which is really good. And he's found out a really interesting thing, actually. He's been buying games from CEX.
Sex.
That's
what they call themselves.
And this is the computer exchange place. Yeah. And basically they're selling retro games without manuals. So what they've decided to do is photocopy the manuals themselves, put them into the games, and then sell it as a genuine thing. So they're actually counterfeiting manuals themselves.
Wow. or downloading them off the internet or something, I guess.
Yeah,
like
well, he's, put this up on Twitter and said, look at this, I've got this manual. And then it's like Manuals Anonymous or something. Everybody's kind of posted pictures of all their copied versions of manuals that CEX has been making. And this is actual piracy because they're owned by like Namco and stuff like that. It's like CEX shouldn't be doing that.
Well, even in terms of the, outside of the legality of doing it, ethically, we know, we're not massive retro gaming collectors, you and I. We're more hardware guys, in all honesty. But I've got friends who are. They want to get every game for every system boxed, mint condition.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you buy that and then you open it up and it's a bloody photocopied manual or a self-produced. And the fact is, he looked on some of the manuals and on the back it had a CEX logo.
Right, okay.
So it was like they weren't even attempting to hide it.
But it does increase the price of classic games to have the manuals included.
Yeah.
So that is pretty underhanded.
Well, he's done some great stuff on his channel. So there's been a recent thing about Watch Mojo.
Yeah.
And they pretty much ripped off one of Larry Bundy's videos. 100% to rip off the script. Now, Larry is incredibly smart and he puts little fake facts in there. So he'll be like, 1,009 copies were sold. Just to add that little edge. So he went to Watch Mojo and said, you've completely copied my video because you've even copied the fake facts. And he put that in and they've taken his video down and apologised to him.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, they admitted that they kind of copied it. So check out his channel, Top Hat Gaming. He's the big paparazzi of retro gaming at the moment.
I do love YouTube channels like that. Like Review Tech USA is one of my favourite as well. And he kind of discovers all that kind of stuff. More of the American kind of focus. But yeah, I mean, they're just videos you can watch back to back and just absorb so much from them, aren't they?
Totally, but it also shows that this retro gaming thing, people are really getting on it and trying to make money out of it, aren't they?
And don't rip off Guru Larry. No one should rip off Guru Larry. Come on, we love Larry. Now, we had a pretty creepy story a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember we were talking about the fact that an artificial intelligence computer managed to find a glitch and get the highest score on Qbert?
Yeah, because they're training these AIs by playing retro old school games, which is kind of ironic. It's like, play your son. It's weird.
That's how Skynet is learning.
Yeah.
Well, now, I love this headline in here, actually. It's on ozretrogamer.com. Skynet can now play Gallagher.
Okay.
Now, do you remember Gallagher, like the old school shoot 'em up, one of the earliest arcade shooters? One of my favourite as well. I mean, I think I first saw it in the movie War Games when David Lightman's playing it in the cafe on there. I was thinking, oh, that's a cool game. Then I found a cabinet of it at my local seaside. Played it all afternoon. Loved that game.
And that game was copied so much as well. There were so many Gallagher clones everywhere.
Oh, totally, yeah. Legendary arcade game. But now there is actually a program called Learn Fun and Play Fun AI. Now, this is built by a guy called Tom Murphy. And what it does, I've been watching a few videos about this. This is a program that you can download. And the way it works is you play like an arcade game or maybe it kind of works better with early games, early 80s, late 70s kind of stuff, quite simplistic games. And say you open an emulator, you record a bit of screenplay footage, you play the game for about a minute, try and do it well, and then you feed this video into this learning program. It will study your moves and learn how to play the game based on your moves in this video.
Oh, cool.
So this program...
Wow, so you're just literally showing it a little clip and then it's understanding everything.
Yeah, just from like a minute of you showing it what to do, essentially, which is pretty crazy. And they've actually put a video up on YouTube at the moment of this Learn Fun and Play Fun AI system playing Gallagher. Now, bearing in mind it had never played the game before, imagine if you never played a video game before and someone sat you down in front of it and went, right, okay, go. You get 3 lives, bear in mind. How long do you think you'd last?
2 minutes.
I've been playing the game about 30 years. I still only lost about 2 minutes on it. This AI plays for 7 minutes.
Oh,
in this
bad
video.
Boy.
And it doesn't even die. The emulator gets shut down because a Windows update happened on his PC, so it could have still been playing to this day.
God.
But I think that is insane, isn't it? So, what I'm thinking is, though, if this AI learns better and better and gets to be really good, what's to stop people uploading, kind of long play videos on YouTube and have an AI play them all and make them look really good?
We'll have to get one at Play Expo to sit next to us and kind of play on the arcade machine.
Just mime the moves to it, yeah. Wow, Ravi, you're incredible.
Everybody learn from this guy.
It's kind of creepy, but very cool as well, I think. If you want to download that software, I think it's free to download and install on your PC at home. A little bit of fiddling around with it, need some configuration, like taking out your start buttons and all that kind of thing, but it looks really cool. I'm definitely going to give it a go this weekend. So I'll put that in this week's show notes at theretrohour.com. And tell us about this. A little project to preserve old computer operating systems.
Yeah, this is really cool. So Yale Library are working on this absolutely crazy system, and this is to preserve everything. So it started when a visitor came to them and they said, they wanted to look at a CD-ROM-based multimedia website.
There was a lot of them around back in the day.
Yeah. And it was with this 1996 exhibition. So basically, they tracked down an old license of NT, they tracked down the old version of Netscape Navigator and Adobe Reader, and then they got an old HP Tower and got it all working on there. And they thought, that's quite a good idea. But now what they've decided to do is create these in virtual machines.
Okay. Because, that's the thing. If you want to get kind of, the perfect replication of the hardware setup back then, it's quite a task, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And if you just want to play a certain piece of software, you have to create these environments. So they're saying that they're creating this kind of Rosetta Stone ultimate universal translator for old computers, but it's really slow because they've got to build every single little kind of environment and setup to run each program, make sure all the libraries are installed, all the drivers. It's a very long-term project, but they're saying, it will be browser-based, so you'll be able to go on your browser, a few clicks, and then load up your old information, and anything that's corrupted you might be able to recover, or any old lost data. But I think this is quite cool. It's like software preservation. Like you heard of the Kyroflux, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's a wonderful system where you can read any floppy disk.
And they preserve it to the bit, don't they?
To the bit, yeah. So now you could use this system if you had access to Yale Library, and then kind of boost it into an environment where you can get it running.
Because I know you can do, obviously, like stuff like DOSBox, you can install old Windows stuff on there, but it's a lot of messing about and configuring it and everything. The fact this is browser-based.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able, I imagine it'll be drag and drop and have loads of different configs.
And because it's through Yale, I think it's going to be, a resource that's going to be there for a long time and used in educational institutions, all to get this old stuff working. Like, imagine how much information's still out there that's just sitting around on whatever media and just... we haven't got access to it, and I bet a lot of it's really important.
Yeah, and it'll be lost forever if projects like this don't happen.
Well, what did they say? I think it's the last 100 years, the most information's been lost ever.
Well, probably in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's nuts. But even like, I've got a Windows 98 PC that I set up last year to play some old like games on. But I thought I'd mess around with a bit of these you remember these classic multimedia things we're talking about here?
Yeah.
I tried to get like Encarta. I think it was the original one that I remember using at school. Like the 93, 94 version of it, I remember using when we first got a CD-ROM drive at school. I thought, I wouldn't mind installing that. Managed to get the ISO file, but it wouldn't work in Windows 98. Even though that's quite similar to 95, apparently I did a bit of digging around and found like some old newsgroup posts and they were like, yeah, it only works with Windows 95. I couldn't be bothered to actually set up another machine with 95 on.
Yep.
Haven't got hardware and drivers compatible with it. So it's either like virtual PC or you're looking at DOSBox and like, you're talking a full afternoon to configure all that kind of stuff. Not really worth it to run in Encarta 1993, if I'm honest, but if you got this on a web browser, drag and drop it in.
Yeah, and if there's lots of people contributing to it, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Absolutely.
Which it sounds like a great idea, this universal kind of emulator.
And I'm glad that someone like, an organisation to the standard of Yale are realising the importance of it as well.
Yeah, totally. And just think how much old stuff's about there. It's probably nuclear codes on some discs and stuff like that. Quick, get it before it rots.
Yeah, don't let that Learn Play AI thing play any of those.
Yeah.
Keep them well away. So if you want to find out more about that, I'll put that in this week's show notes as well at theretrohour.com. And of course, you can download next week's show from all of your favourite podcast clients too, every single week. One stuff like Overcast, I've switched to recently.
Yeah, Overcast is quite nice, actually, because you can download them and listen to them offline.
Yeah. And because I was using Stitcher before, or the iOS podcast app, and I've deleted the iOS podcast app today because my phone ran out of room, and I was like, it's really weird. I've got like,
downloading every single one, wasn't it, in
the
background?
Look at my usage, 60 gigabytes of podcasts on my phone. So, yeah, I've got a lot more room on my phone since I deleted
I find
that.
it's great for train journeys when you're going in the tunnels. If you download the podcast before, then you're not getting any cutouts.
Yeah, and you can do it at home on your Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Not rinse your data too. So we do get people asking all the time. So, I mean, we did actually do very well on the iTunes chart, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? Were we number 2?
Yeah.
I think the tech chart.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of comments going, iTunes is all well and good, but I've got an Android phone and all that. So we are actually on pretty much every podcast client at the moment.
That's the thing, because iTunes pumps out to everybody. And one thing everybody doesn't know about iTunes is it's broken. It's actually broken. The charts are broken and Apple haven't fixed it. So
oh, really? What's wrong with it?
It's just really inaccurate and crazy.
Oh, but not for we're number 2, surely. Very accurate.
Oh, yeah, very accurate.
Yeah.
No, we should have been number 1.
Oh, right, okay, I understand. Yeah, get that sorted, Apple. And now, let's go really old school, talk about Commodore 64 music. Our special guest this week is Jeroen Tel. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Thank you for coming on, Jeroen Tel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, we're going to get really in depth about the Commodore 64, the SID chip. We were talking before you came on, actually, about what an incredible chip SID was. And, to this day, that is still regarded as one of the greatest... Oh, sorry, it still is, come on. But even to this day, it is regarded as like one of the all-time legendary sound chips that's ever been in a computer. I mean, we'll get into your experiences with that very soon. But let's wind all the way back to day one. I mean, what was it that originally got you into computers then? Where did it all start for you?
Technology always has interested me, like electricity and playing around with it. Electrocuting myself many times over, but whilst playing with it. But at some point were like this little tools, like the first calculator came out, like it was handheld, a Texas Instrument, a really small one. Was pretty expensive at the time. Had to have it, and it was not normal that you would have a calculator, maybe just for some businesses or something, with paper in it and everything. But that was it. And then there was like this really small with LCD screen. I could multiply, divide, have the square root out of the number, but it was just something that was mesmerizing to me. And maybe I was 5 or 6, something like that. Then at 8, there was this Casio watch coming out, which had oscillators in it. It played like songs like "Oh, When the Saints Were Coming In" and all that stuff, children's songs basically, or holiday songs. But I was mesmerized by the oscillator that it had such pure sound. It was like, someone programmed this. Someone programmed those notes. I want to program those notes. I make music on the piano, but I want a computer to actually make sound that I can program just like this Casio watch did. Then at 10, I got a ZX80, a borrowed one actually, from my uncle. And I was like, I tried the beep command and I could actually program for the first time notes on a computer. That was nice. And then in 1982, Commodore 64 came out and a friend of mine bought one. I heard something and the early games had very simple music. This is, okay, now I ditched the ZX80, I gave back to my uncle, and me and my brother, we actually bought the Commodore 64, actually to play games, but also I started programming in BASIC, programmed the sound chip basically, and making hear plays and sounds, and I really experimented with it, with filter and pulse width, and I read the book, of course. But I got so mesmerized, I actually started making complete songs. Unfortunately, all of them, the basic songs, are lost. They were saved on tape, and those tapes are gone. So let's not talk about it. It gets me sad. No, anyway.
Well, what was the kind of demo scene like in the Netherlands back then, and when it was really early on as well?
Yeah, really into that scene, because it was like a lot of friends, mostly kids, about 14, 15, 16. Getting together, showing each other their coding, their graphics, not music at the time because there was no one making music actually. Yeah, so people came from all over the Netherlands and also from Germany because it was really close to the border of Germany and Belgium, and it was jam packed basically and good atmosphere. The funny thing was it was some kind of demo wars going on and group wars. Yeah, it was kind of childish in a way, but that was part of what it was then back then. But most of it was really friendly and just showing each other what they could do and learn from each other, basically.
When you got your Commodore 64 then, I mean, you started making music on that, and I heard you were like 13, 14 years old and going around computer shows to play companies your music. I mean, what gave you kind of the idea to do that? And it must have took a lot of confidence for a kid to go out to like these big companies and show them your music.
Well, as I said, I put in the hours to actually get good somehow. Meet up with the right people, getting the right tools. Like I went to Amsterdam to get a Commodore 64 programmer's reference guide, which is the Commodore 64 Bible, and a power cartridge, which I needed both, and Turbo Assembler, the software by Alex Schultz, to actually program the music in machine language. We already released, I think, it was designed Noisy Pillars. Yes, that was the first one. Yeah, we were confident about the music. There was only Rob Hubbard, Martin Galway, Ben Douglas, not many others, I think. And I definitely felt like I was up to speed with that. Well, not the level of composing, but the sound was good, and I knew what I was doing. And Charles actually opted like we can just go to the Commodore show or the PCW show at the time, which later became HDS. Big show, really big. Well, we just had a couple of discs, dozens of discs with us, and we just handed them over to Electronic Arts, Ubisoft, and all the other Activision. And there were the setters of Commodore 64, so most of them had like this private booth, and they would just load it up and they would hear the music and see this kid standing there. I was 14 at the time. And then they asked, like, did you make this music? I said, yeah.
They're like, no way, kid.
Yeah, something like that all the time. It's like, okay, well, it's excellent. And they just handed over business cards, and we left our... Well, the disc already had our contact information on it from actually Charles was a little bit older than me, 1.5 years, something like that. So he would take care of the logistics part of that, I think.
You got offered jobs by these big companies when you were like 13?
It was 14, 15-ish. The one thing is like the most interesting story actually was from that PCW show. One of them, I think it was the first one actually. I got to meet the people from Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts was kind of a growing company, but they were not like as huge as they are now. And they really were keen on getting me. And they said, well, they didn't know my age because I didn't say my age. And I looked a little bit older because I had a little mustache or whatever. I really have a clue, but they actually sent me a contract that they wanted me to work for Electronic Arts, but I had to call them up, say, okay, at the moment I'm only 15, and my mom doesn't allow me to move to the States just literally like that, and they said, you are only 15, and it just, my mother didn't allow it. She said, you will finish your school, and after that you can do whatever you want. But it was so funny that I had turned Electronic Arts down, and then they asked Rob Hubbard.
That's it. And how was the UK scene compared to being back home? Because you obviously flew over to see people.
At the time, it was actually a bit of a wild west in video games. It was not much was really professional about it. Of course, there was big money going around in it for the publishers. But it was a bit of a wild west of video game production, programming, and development, and wild west in publishing too. It's like nothing was like as streamlined as it is now. It was all pretty haphazard. I didn't know the industry. I was a kid. I was more into like, okay, I want to make music for video games. That was the whole thing, and I got that vision when I was playing. I think it was Take on the Spring with music by Rob Hubbard, and when I heard that,
is that
French? But this was literally like, go, this is awesome. And I was blown away. Already trying to make music just for fun and stuff. Then I realized I want to make music for video games. I really do.
Was that when you kind of formed Maniacs of Noise and a dedicated sound company?
I first came to the conclusion that I wanted to do music for video games. Then when I got really dedicated to learning this thing completely, getting into machine code or whatever I could do to make professional music program to actually do music for games. That was the whole thing, and I couldn't do it myself. I needed help at the beginning, and that's where I contacted. I met him at the Venlo parties, and we got hooked up basically and engaged with each other in the to form Maniacs of Noise in the end.
Well, how hard was it to kind of make music back then? Because now we have like trackers and lots of programs. Back then, I guess it was just like routines and bashing the metal, really. I
was so used to programming my music in hexadecimal numbers, I still prefer to do that for the Commodore 64. Literally put dot bytes, C1 for a sound, 8/4 for length, and then the note, or arpeggio table and then a note. And it's like note script to me. It's musical script to me. It's like if you have musical script paper right in front of you. Same thing for me. That's how I wrote it down even in school when I had music ideas. Just started writing down hexadecimal numbers. And it's actually the fastest way to compose because I don't hear what I do with my fingers. That means like if you play a keyboard or a tracker thing, you hear this note being played. You can get distracted from the original idea. I composed in my head, programmed it in, then assembled it. See if it was right or not. When I was a mistake, I could just change whatever was wrong. Add some stuff to it, assemble it again, hear it back. But I didn't assemble that many times because most of the time I just had a vision of what needs to be programmed. And there's a very fast way to do it, actually. Because I did use some wanted to play Chris Hulsbeck when it was out in 1996 or something. It was really nice, but it was huge and invested time. And it doesn't do what I want to do. It's like I have really programmed wavetables and programmed glissando instead of having portamento on from one note to another. Exactly time it like the portamento starts here. And it goes to that note at this speed. And vibrato, right now you can have vibrato on and off. No, I just want to have a fixed note after, let's say, 3/10 of a second, 3/16 of a note, then to the vibrato start. And also want control over how fast it starts. Does it start to vibrate and then go higher in amplitude? Or do I want an instant amplitude vibrato? Like an opera singer, I wanted to control all of that. To actually program the notes like that was a very easy way for me actually to do it. It becomes such a routine. If you do this like, thousands and thousands of hours every year, it's second nature. You don't have to think about it. It's so easy. Well, but if someone looked at me programming this stuff, they were like, what the hell? Are you programming music right now?
Did you guys share software and kind of share routines and ideas? And did you notice a lot more people kind of making music then?
When I started, I don't think there was that many people actually making music. There were some, maybe. We were actually pretty protective of our Maniacs of Noise routine because it was our property, basically, and it gave us our edge. Not that we were... At the time when we went to this PW show and the Commodore show, we had so much work to do that we always declined some of the projects. It was everybody wanted to use Maniacs of Noise, basically. Mind you, I was still going to school, and so was Charles, but we did everything on the side, mostly at night, of course, for me. I didn't sleep much in my youth. Well, anyway, it was totally worth it, but one thing is we always were busy, but we didn't share routines, no. Our routine was hacked a lot for Future Composer or whatever. Now, in hindsight, I think, okay, whatever, I don't care. But at the time, I was really fed up when someone would do that and just started using our routine. But that was just me being a silly kid. Or maybe ambitious kid, or I don't know. I put in the thousands of hours, and someone just to rip it off just like that and pluck the fruits of what I saw of the trees I grow. That was a bit off for me, and also for Charles. I mean, yeah, it's okay. But there was no real musician scene or something. At the time, I didn't know any musicians. I knew a lot of graphics and programmers, but not musicians. They all ripped, like the demo makers or something. They ripped music from games and always music by Rob Hubbard or something, and Melting Galway, Van Dockers, all that stuff.
Well, now Maniacs of Noise, you guys were quite well known on the cracktro and the music disc scene as well. I mean, was that an important element to the community? That's
a very good one. Before, as I said, even the intro and the characters, they always had music from games by Rob Hubbard, music by Rob Hubbard, Martin Galway, Ben Douglas, and then we did this. Well, this is the funny thing. I always did these just for fun tracks too, and those were really the ones used a lot for the cracktros and demos and stuff. But that was just the just for fun stuff, because if you always have to make music for a game. I make music to make people happy with my music and my notes, and I always did that also for myself. Those are the cooler tunes and the shorter tunes and the more catchy tunes, like what a teenager likes. And when it comes to the Commodore 64 version, I think that makes a difference because I was a really young guy. I was a teenager, and all the other guys were like in their mid-20s, older than even. It was a big difference. So I was more linked to the culture that the Commodore 64 was actually populated by, which was kids playing video games. And these kids also listen to pop music, and I was more in that zone, with Madonna and whatever was hit songs back then. That was more my vibe. Not that I was a big Madonna fan or something, but it was everything that was back then of 80s hits or something really influenced me too. And I was able to bring that to the Commodore 64 somehow. And because of the limitations of the Commodore 64, make it like even more melodic or funky or something like that. But that concept really worked. And what's the most interesting thing is that then now the whole electro scene, the whole pop scene and even music scene, you hear 8-bit sounds everywhere.
Yeah.
Arpeggios everywhere. I even was asked to do additional synth sounds to rock songs from Stagma. The Stagma band is a compilation band with rock legends. I was kind of amazed when I heard the names, musicians from Inge Malmsteen, AC/DC, Dio, and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, I did it, and it actually works really well. But it's hot right now, and I think I know why, because people got used to it. The thing is that there's a whole generation growing up with parents who have played these video games. Their kids, of course, are exposed to this from a very young age. There was this whole thing with the ringtones coming by, where everybody was actually buying ringtones and playing ringtones with their Nokias and everything, which was just an oscillator, basically.
Yeah.
And people get used to this sound so much that it was embraced by culture, basically, and by the general culture, and it became a thing right now. The retro scene is hotter than everything. Everything has to be pixely, and everything has to be I don't know, a bit simplistic. Less is more, basically.
It is crazy though, because I remember a time when everything had to be really highly polished. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, when music producers started putting the sound effects of vinyl onto CDs, like crackling over the music. It's like trying to get it back to roots and back a bit more analog, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. It's funny.
Well, how was it working with Houston Consulting? You worked with them, didn't you, back in the day?
Yeah, it was a pleasure. The big boss, basically. A very kind man. He was a big fan of our music, and really got us engaged in doing the track for Cybernoid 2 for Battle Valley. Battle Valley was actually one of the earliest one. I think it was actually the first one I did on commission to work for Maniacs of Noise, apart from Hawkeye, because Hawkeye was more privately with my friends, basically.
Well, you managed to work with quite an amazing list of companies here, especially in the UK C64 scene. We, have Mastertronics, you had Houston Consultants, Infogrames as well, System Free. Who would you say was your favourite kind of people to work for, and what were their briefs like for music?
Probe Software Limited that was the company that made most of the productions, basically for a lot of different publishers, US Gold and for Ocean Software. But they were a production company. They were really a video game developer who worked in. On some projects, they did it on their own, and then searched for a publisher. But most of the time, publisher came to them to develop a game, for example. They needed a game from a existing movie. Ocean did this a lot of times. Also, how Robocop 3 came to be was a bit later. I'll tell you that, but there was Alien 3 for the Nintendo and everything. So I also diversified a little bit, not just to be on Commodore 64, but also on the Nintendo. Did quite some, well, not too many, but what the music I did there was actually excellent. But they were okay. The company was run by Fergus McGovern. God have his soul. He has passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He was really like a fan of my music, and also gave me a lot of freedom to work with them, and he gave me freedom to not be that. He didn't produce me too much, and he didn't have us to produce me too much, because he believed in that I was really good at describing the atmosphere of the game within the music, and that was a really fun thing, of course. And I started actually traveling there when I was 16 already, and during weekends or holidays, to work at Tamworth Road in East Croydon at their offices, and then I would go back home and go back to school. Really weird.
What did your parents think of that when you were so young?
They liked it, actually. They were, but at the beginning they were a bit wary, but they already let me go to this PCW show. They saw that I was really passionate about the whole thing. They did say, okay, please finish school and everything, but they liked that I showed entrepreneurship, I think. Yeah, they left us a little bit free. I mean, I think most parents would not have done that, so I thank them very much that they allowed me so much freedom actually to travel and to, do all this stuff.
It must have been fantastic going over and kind of seeing Probe. And what was the atmosphere like back then?
Absolutely brilliant. It's like... It's a very mixed crowd, basically. Well, I would say some of them are like more the hippies of the video game industry. People call it nerdy or geeky anyway, but more like the normal breed of people, more business-like or something. But also the one thing was everything was friendly, creative, helpful. It was a new industry. I mean, you felt all this new energy flowing around. Like everything you did was new. Everything you did was maybe not done before, and that atmosphere was something that was really around everywhere. I mean, also in all the other studios, it was you could be innovative for anything and do one thing for the first time, and a new scroller for a racing game like Simon Nickel did. It was legendary, and I played samples on the Commodore 64 and like crystal quality, but. That atmosphere was in everything. Like, okay, I found a new way to anti-alias stuffing or make new colors with mixing all this stuff, and you felt that it was a very creative crowd, basically. Very creative people. Inspiring. A very inspiring environment. That's actually a good word for it.
Well, one game I remember that you did the music for was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the C64 and the Amiga. I mean, obviously that was a massive cartoon at the time, and it had a very recognisable theme tune.
Yeah.
I mean, was translating a song that's kind of already known to everybody into a computer game, was that a bit of a challenge? And how did you approach that?
Well, that was never a challenge. The one thing is I always ask, can I freebie on this? Can I recompose it or something? Well, depended on the company. The publisher, basically, if that was allowed or not. And most of the time, for example, like Teenage Mutant Ninja, it wasn't actually allowed. I still did it and see if I could get away with it. And if I wouldn't get away with it, then I would hear about it and I would just program the right notes or something. But I thought that would really fit the video game better or something like that. And most of the time, I got away with it, which was a lot of fun. I mean, also for Afterburner for Sega, I actually changed the notes and added to it. Outrun was actually a very good example that I just... went all the way in, doing what I did, and they loved it, so they just kept it that way. But it was nice to actually take a theme that was for a game that was already there, or maybe a movie, and sometimes, step away from it completely, like Alien 3. Well, there's nothing I can do with the movie music. Well, I could, but it would not have impact at all, because, people know the movie Aliens, or Alien, and but they don't know the music. It's really typically movie music that is more an underscore or something, and that doesn't have a theme.
Yeah, it's more orchestral.
Well, it's orchestral, but okay. Indiana Jones is orchestral too. Everybody knows that. That's really typical stylish stuff, and I believed, and that was a very strong point, to have a title tune, especially a title tune that would really stand out. That would be which is an identity for the game also. I mean, if I say Cybernaut, you don't think about the game, you think about the music, for example.
Well, you're working on these massive titles like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Alien 3. I mean, essentially you were doing the soundtracks for, conversions of these massive blockbuster global franchises. It must have been pretty cool to be working on such projects. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, every time was like blast, and they just kept coming like that. And, well, it's inspiring them to do the absolute best you could, and there were like days I would, because it was, most of the time we had a very quick turnaround for making a game, because it's like now this movie's coming out, or it's already out, and now we need a very good video game fast for this, and everybody would work like crazy hours. We're talking about 14 hours a day, easy. Even sleeping in the offices and stuff. I mean, sometimes I just spend 40 hours straight on working. Sometimes going out to eat and maybe quick shower or something, but then just work and not sleep, and then. And when I would be done, I would crash for a day or something, and go back there and start another crazy project. But you knew what you did it for. It was for like a massive title. It was always nice to do. And still, so we were young. I mean, I started working in house for Probe, for example, when I was 18. So, whole nice story how I got there, and that I dodged the army because of it, actually. I had so much energy, and everybody had that energy. So this inspiration kept us going and everything. And it was really inspiring, and especially having these big titles that really helped. I mean, seriously, I think it was actually Robocop 3 on Nintendo. I remember starting at 1 o'clock at night. That was the start of my day.
Wow.
I sat down, and then I started programming this music, and straight from the head into assembler. And on this Nintendo development kit of £50,000, I remember. It was from the company. Licensed by Nintendo. And I think it was around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, I was finished with the whole thing.
Talking of the Nintendo then, I mean, how did you find the NES to produce music on? So they did like Bram Stoker Dracula on there as well. And how did you find that coming from the Commodore 64?
Well, I found it very limiting. Commodore 64 had full pulse width modulation. They only had 2 channels, FF channels, that you could only play a pulse wave on, no other wave. And only with the settings 12.5%, 25%, and 50% pulse width. Like E, and U. That's it. Okay. And so people didn't even think about making it sound like pulse width modulation, but I alternated between them anyway, so you had a little bit of that 64 vibe going on it. And that really worked. But it was very limiting compared to COM 64. Seriously. 2 channels FM, 1 channel more like a sine wave-ish low. Actually, it became a kind of a feature of that thing. It's a very specific sound. It was actually a programmable waveform thing, and a noise generator. So it was actually 4 notes polyphonic, but very simple. But it somehow just you see it, the sound, what the limits are, and then you work with the limits. And there's one thing like this low channel, this third channel, where you had a low output bass sound to it, combined with the noise channel, you could really make great drums with it, like like that, And on the Commodore 64, you had to alternate between waves, and you could actually use that on top of each other. So that was, and you would have a really cool sounds. But it's like using the feature of this limitation of the chip. That's always the good thing. But compared to the Commodore 64, rubbish.
Well, you actually worked on one of the final, if not the last Commodore 64 commercial title. You did the music for Lemmings on the Commodore 64.
Yes, 1994.
How did you approach that then? And because that was a very late game, wasn't it?
Well, it was they said Lemmings couldn't be done on the Commodore 64 because of all the amount of little guys running around, the Lemmings running around. And I think it was Remy Ebers, he's from the Netherlands, he got in contact somehow with Psygnosis, and he said, well, we can actually do this because we have a very good programmer, very good graphic designer, and a very good musician. And he just mentioned the names, and he was like, well, if you can do it, why not? It would be fun to actually have a final release on the Commodore 64. And it's popular enough. I mean, Lemmings was extremely popular at the time.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, seriously, there was like everybody was playing Lemmings. Even girls were just completely obsessed with it. So we managed to develop the whole game, and so it came to be. But it actually was one of the last, if not the last, commercially released title at the time. Because after that, it was a big break of nothing. Now people are releasing on the Commodore 64 again as kind of as a niche, I think, right?
Well, I love the soundtrack you did on the Commodore 64 on Lemmings, because, it doesn't just sound like the Amiga version. You've got that really kicking bass line on there. It's really, really good soundtrack. And I mean, I guess you didn't just want to kind of replicate the Amiga version. You wanted to make it your own, did you?
It had Sound 64, and I really wanted it to be my own, because there were covers from like existing popular melodies anyway, like children's songs. But anyway, just had a Commodore 64, 2 channels to my disposal, and I was like, yeah, let's make this fun.
Well, out of all the kind of tunes that you've made and projects you've done, which ones have you enjoyed the most, and why?
It's a very good one. I think Tomcat F14 is one of the songs I really felt accomplished by making. I still love the melodies, by the way. It's very complex. It's technically brilliant. But when it comes to having a really good structure, very good theme, highly inspired, not more technical, but more like musically inspired, this could actually really be a classical piece, would be a Supremacy. It has a theme which is absolutely catchy, completely inspired. It has a structure of dynamics of an orchestra. I had the orchestra in mind when I programmed it, actually. Composed it, I should say, whilst programming it. And it has this whole structure, and it's absolutely catchy. And it actually is one of my, most celebrated tunes too. But it's one that I can really put on 1,000 times and still enjoy it the 1,000th time. It's that simple. I think that one is really the one that I would, actually, I'm remixing it right now. I've been working 80 hours on this remix, and just doesn't this one. It's actually right in front of me right now. It never gets boring somehow.
Well, what about ones that you're not too keen on then? Are there any that you look back on and think, oh, I could do better than that now?
Yeah, well, Night Hunter comes to mind. Ubisoft was really on our asses, like, okay, we need this like tomorrow. So will you take it? And I said, yeah, why not? And but I got a bit carried away with sampling, because we could use samples, and I ran out of time basically. And it was a Friday night, I think, and I actually went into town with my brother. It's kind of a funny story, because we actually started recording like the samples, like a burp here and like or whatever there. And in the end, I thought, yeah, when I come home, I will just redo some really proper things. But we came home really late, and I still had to deliver on Friday or Saturday. So Charles would come on Saturday and pick up the music, and I just had to have it. So I actually didn't bother to sample more samples, because I already had some really good ones. And started programming the music, the title tune at least. And yeah, well, what came out is actually pretty good. But the songs, if you hear this burp in between, okay, I imagine that could be a monster that just ate a skull or something. Basically, that was how I could justify that one. But it's still funny. But if I had more time for that one, because I was really inspired actually. But more time to finish that one, then I would have put so much more detail into it. But there's always going to be these productions that you're not going to be 100% satisfied with, especially to the deadline that came up sometimes. They want like a 7-minute piece, but they want it tomorrow. Yeah, okay, good luck with that. Then you can expect there to be some kind of trade-off between quality and quantity. I mean, I'd rather make a 4-minute really excellent one than a 7-minute rushing a deadline where the quality of the minutes that are there is a little bit less. It was always, I think it was always still good. I mean, I never lacked inspiration or something like that, but when you can really sit down and pay attention to a little bit of the detail, like legato, staccato, or have some crescendo or some So some nuances, like you can program an echo by filling in the gaps that are silent with an echo from the last note, for example. These things make a difference, especially with chip music. I really ran out of time when I did Eliminator. It also had to have a title tune, and I completely forgot about that. I was completely engaged in this in-game stuff, and I made it a very long one, 7.5 minutes or something. I don't know what it was, but 6 minutes? I don't know what it was, but I thought that was it. But there was a specification, a title tune. And I tell you this much, I had the sounds ready, so I could just start making music, program music. But Charles was already on his way from, where he lived in Holthays, and he would be there in like 1 hour.
Wow.
So I had 1 hour to do that tune, if that, I made it the melody in my head. I just programmed like a maniac, and I thought I did something too simple or something, but it turned out to be actually a very nice tune. It was actually beautiful in its simplicity. When I hear it now, I really like it. But it was, of course, I would not have written this song this way when I would have had like a day for it. Then it would be very extensive. But it's also not a very big part of the game. So it's an interesting thing that for Eliminator, instead of normally it's a title track that's where if you say Cybernoid, you think about the main title. If you think about Cybernoid, you think about the main title. If you think Golden Axe, you think about the main title. If you think about any game, you think about the main title. But the Eliminator, the first tune playing in any little SID files and stuff, the SID play, it's going to be the in-game tune.
Well, I loved your production of Golden Axe as well on the Commodore 64. I thought, again, so it was a game I played at the arcades before, but you managed to capture it and give it its kind of own unique spin, but yet there was still the sound effects and everything were in the game too. I mean, was it often tricky to kind of work around sound effects and music at the same time when you had both playing?
Actually, at that time, I think we did not yet incorporate the fact that there was channels reserved for the music and channels reserved for the sound effects. It was Charles always used we had a priority player basically, which actually kind of worked well. I thought it was I think it was disturbing, but that because I'm a perfectionist in music, that some music would drop out and a sound effect would play on top of it. It's actually a good way to increase polyphony. But I thought it was a bit disturbing. I mean, why not just use one channel for the sound effects and two channels for the music? Then, they will not interfere with each other. It will sound extremely tight and professional, basically. And I used all these tricks to make like a kick, snare, hi-hat, bass, everything in one go where it would sound like three channels for one channel. And then on the other channel would have the melody, arpeggios, percussion and everything. It would sound like another 2-3 channels. So it could suffice with those two channels if you used the right tricks and had in mind it was only going to be on two channels. Then you could really dedicate the third voice to completely sound effects, for example. Where I could, I actually started doing this with Afterburner, I think, yeah. Then I made all these two-channel tracks, and then the third channel would be reserved for sound effects, which was, of course, very desirable for a game with a jet fighter, because there's the constant noise of pew, pew, all these sounds.
Well, how much of a change was it when kind of, later systems came in, like the Amiga and like CDI with like CD sound and stuff?
Huge change. Took a while to get adjusted to a little bit too. Well, Amiga was, that wasn't too hard. I mean, instead of doing FM synthesis, actually together with a friend, I made a synthesis routine on Amiga. But somehow it's a bit of a logistics problem. We never got to finish it when I was already asked to come to London, working with Dave Perry on Supremacy and everything. And he fixed the player I was working on with a guy called Wim Verhees. He was part of the demo group Madness. Anyway, I was part of that, and the Artworks was part of that too. When I was a kid, and he was like, he did this quick Amiga routine for me. But it was fun to do, but it's a whole different way of working, especially FM has this natural sound and samples. I mean, if you pitch up a sample of a piano, you can just pitch, this is the sample that's been pitched up, you can hear that, unless you sample every note individually. And, there was not memory enough for that. But anyway, people liked that sound somehow, because it was all new and fresh, and samples were awesome. And but I was a bit of a purist in that area, because I was a bit hesitant to actually work on many Amiga soundtracks. I rather did the Commodore 64 stuff and Nintendo stuff because it was FM based. But anyway, in some point it became inevitable that music is going to be streamed now. It's It's going to be about mixing. It's going to be about having, well, not unlimited tracks. I think most of it still was, we went to XM modules, like 16 to 32 channels of music. You could really, use a lot of polyphony things to actually make something sound really good. Still be very compact in size, because that's what's the whole thing that the games were still about, that you had to be a certain size to fit on a disc or a cartridge or something. But then, of course, they became the real, like, the streaming revolution was like 1994, 1995, when everything could actually be done that way. That could be, I will not say real music, but let's say music from a music studio, where you don't have limits. I mean, if you want to use 1,000 samples, okay, 1,000 synthesizers, you can do it on top of each other if you want.
In recent years, we've seen a massive resurgence of chip music, like you mentioned before, with kind of indie titles coming out, and like retro's cool at the moment. Have you seen like a resurgence of interest in your older stuff, like from back in the 80s?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things going on. I actually I'm actually doing the music for a game called Pixel Racing. It is let's say new school programming, but there's old school 8-bit graphic style. There's Thunder Wheels, which is also a bit based on retro gaming racing game. And I see all these games coming out, all these indie projects. But Minecraft is of course a very good example of that pixely game can do really, really well. But I think that this retro gaming thing is coming back because we have Grand Theft Auto 5. Now we know what we can do, okay? And how far do you want to go with that? That's going into a certain direction. But I think the genre has never left, because there was always a market for it, but it was a bit snowed under because everybody had to run for the money. But people got interested, the new generation especially, they got interested in this whole retro gaming stuff, and even retro music stuff, retro painting, like painting sprites, just that, because it's cool. It's old school cool. I don't know what it is exactly, the trend, but I love it. It captures some kind of, I don't know, 80s vibe, and the 80s is back kind of thing. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I know it's there, and I enjoy it. I really do. It feels good. It feels like some kind of a reference to hippies times, Like I think in the wasn't it like in the 90s, in the hippies time was really like glorified. Yeah, no, I think now the 80s and 90s are glorified. That's like it always like a next generation later or something, or I don't know what it is. Something like that. It's always something like that.
Well, I think it's great that you're still involved in chip music, and I can tell it's still something that you're really fond of and it's close to your heart. And it is amazing that you're getting a new audience for your classic material as well, and even like modern gamers today discovering that kind of classic style. I think it's wonderful that you're involved, Jeroen, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your memories with us this week. It's been really appreciated.
My pleasure, and absolutely. I love the 8-bit scene. It's my home. It really is. Now, it's okay. Music is my home, but it's a very big part of who I am. Yeah, what I always loved to do, and my roots are definitely in computer music, programmed computer music. I spend, I don't know if I would have to say this in amount of hours, maybe 80,000, 100,000 hours doing this. I mean, how could I not feel connected to that? Yeah, I mean, I see the Commodore 64 as an extension of my body at the time, and the same thing I think with anyone. The tenniser is a racket, and that's an extension of his body. Yeah, pianist as a piano, it's an extension of his body, and that's how it works, I think.
And long may it continue.
Thank you. And I hope so.